I recognize this makes me irredeemable in most people's eyes. I absolutely flirted with Robert at that disastrous anniversary dinner, and no amount of context will excuse how I behaved. But calling it simple flirtation is like calling a house fire cooking accident, technically true while missing the entire catastrophic reality. I've lost my partner, my apartment, and what little dignity I managed to cling to through this whole mess. What nobody understands, the thing that keeps gnawing at my ribs when I try to sleep, is that I was trying to protect myself from something far worse than infidelity. I promised myself I'd carry this to my grave, but the secret has grown teeth and started biting back. By the time I finish explaining what actually happened at that dinner, you'll realize the flirting was the least horrifying part. 2 months before I became the family pariah, I was scrolling through Mark's iPad while he showered, looking for evidence of the surprise vacation he claimed to be planning. We'd been together 18 months, and his recent secrecy felt like the standard prelude to a proposal. Instead, I found a locked folder labeled consulting projects that required a separate authentication. My thumb hovered over the fingerprint scanner while water ran in the next room. I didn't press it. Not that time. I told myself trust meant not needing to know everything, even as my stomach twisted into something small and hard. Mark had started sleeping with his phone under his pillow. He took conference calls in his car. His laugh changed around his colleagues, higher, performative. When I asked about the strain in his voice, he'd kiss my forehead and mention workplace stress. His father Robert, usually brusque and distracted during our monthly family dinners, began watching me with an expression I couldn't decipher. He'd touch my shoulder too long, refill my wine before I asked. I mistook his attention for paternal concern. At the grocery store, I caught myself checking Mark's pockets while he loaded bags into the car. The rationalizations were already taking root. I finally opened that folder at 2 a.m. while Mark snored whiskey-soaked breath into his pillow. The videos were time-stamped, organized, and devastating. 15 clips of us of me in our bedroom, our bathroom, the hotel in Maui, all uploaded to a private server with subscriber notifications. I counted 47 paying members in the comment section discussing my body with the casual cruelty of livestock judges. My hands shook so violently I dropped the iPad. Mark stirred. I pretended to check the weather. The performance started then, and I haven't stopped since. Robert called the next morning, something he'd never done. He asked if I was okay, if I'd noticed anything unusual about Mark's behavior. His voice cracked when he said unusual, and I understood he knew. He'd known for months, probably longer. He'd been watching me at those dinners because he was trying to calculate the damage. I told him I was fine, perfect, planning a surprise party for Mark's promotion. The lie tasted metallic. He offered to meet for coffee, just to chat. I declined. That's when I stole his house keys from the bowl by his front door during our next visit, lifted them while he hugged Mark goodbye. I told myself evidence required sacrifice. Sarah, Mark's sister, caught me in Robert's study 3 days later. I'd used the key to let myself in while they were at church, searching Robert's computer for confirmation I could use against Mark. She didn't see the screen, but she saw my face. The guilt must have been rabid and obvious. I claimed I'd come to borrow a book Robert promised me. She smiled too wide and mentioned she'd told their mother I was becoming such a part of the family. The subtext was clear. I was a trespasser. Robert confronted me at the cabin the following weekend. I'd driven up expecting emptiness, found him splitting wood behind the garage. He didn't ask how I got in. He told me to stop whatever I was doing, that I was out of my depth with things I didn't understand. I recorded the conversation on my phone, tucked in my back pocket. When I stepped closer, invading his space, his flinch was almost imperceptible. I asked if he'd known about the videos. He dropped the axe. That was answer enough. The worst decision came after he admitted everything. He discovered Mark's side business 6 months prior had been trying to find a way to shut it down without destroying his son, without destroying me. He'd been the one deleting subscriber comments that mentioned doxing. He'd reported the server anonymously 12 times. I slept with him that night on the cabin's lumpy sofa bed, not because I wanted to, but because I needed leverage. I needed a weapon so filthy Mark couldn't possibly use it against me. While Robert wept afterward, I checked my phone to ensure the recording captured his confession. It did. I was so proud of my own monstrosity I couldn't see the trap I'd walked into. The dinner was meant to be armor. I arrived armed with proof, ready to expose Mark and walk away the wounded heroine. Instead, I drank 2 bottles of wine and found myself touching Robert's knee under the table while Mark described our imaginary future. When Mark's mother asked about the cabin, I mentioned how helpful Robert had been. The double meaning curdled in my throat. Robert excused himself. Mark's knuckles went white around his fork. Sarah stared at me with pure, crystallized hatred. I'd become the villain in a story where I was supposed to be the victim. Mark packed my bags while I sat on our bed, still wearing my dinner dress. He folded my clothes with surgical precision, as if neatness could contain the violence of what was happening. He didn't yell. He told me he'd known about the cabin since Sarah called him, that his father had confessed everything out of guilt. He placed the last sweater in the suitcase and said, "You fucked my dad to get back at me for working late. That's your level of crazy." He'd found the server logs I'd printed, but he'd misread them. Thought they were my business idea. The dramatic irony was staggering. I was being expelled for the wrong crime. My best friend Mia refused to take my calls after Mark's social media post. It wasn't the vague booking that hurt, it was her silence. She'd been the one who taught me how to spot red flags, who'd held me through my last breakup's radioactive fallout. When I finally reached her, she said, "You don't get to be the victim after you sleep with someone's father." I wanted to scream that I'd done it to protect women I didn't know from men I did. Instead I whispered, "You don't understand." The phrase I'd rehearsed sounded childish and false. Mark's mother collapsed the next morning, stress-induced arrhythmia. I learned this from the police officer who came to my mother's house where I'd fled like a teenager. He asked if I knew about harassment claims Mark had filed against me. I laughed, a brittle, breaking sound. The officer looked uncomfortable. Mark had told them I was obsessed, that I'd broken into his father's cabin, that I'd become unstable after he tried to end things. The truth and his lie had become Siamese twins, inseparable and deformed. Mark called as I was deleting the recording of Robert. He didn't wait for me to speak. "Did you fuck him before or after you decided to ruin our family?" The question hung between us like a blade. I could have answered honestly. I could have told him about the videos, about the subscribers, about how his father had tried to shield me. Instead I said, "Does it matter?" The silence stretched so long I checked if he'd hung up. He hadn't. He was crying. I recognized the sound because I'd heard it in the videos he'd sold, other women's pain, other women's shame. I became what I was trying to stop. My period was 6 days late when I bought the test. The pharmacist looked at me with the special pity reserved for obvious disasters. I took it in a grocery store bathroom, the kind with coin-operated locks and graffiti about Jesus. 2 lines. The mathematics of conception were brutally simple. I'd slept with Mark 4 days before Robert. The father could be either. I sat on the toilet and laughed until I threw up. This was the revelation that would reframe everything, the secret that made my earlier confession seem quaint. I was pregnant with either my ex-boyfriend's child or his father's, and I couldn't tell which without a test that would cost money I didn't have. The full confession spilled out of me at the precinct of all places. I'd gone to report Mark's video business, armed with screenshots and timestamps. The detective listened, expressionless, while I described the folder, the subscribers, the cabin. When I got to the part about Robert, about the recording, about the pregnancy, she stopped me. "Ma'am, Mr. Anderson filed a restraining order this morning." She slid the paperwork across the desk. I'd been so focused on my moral crusade I hadn't noticed I was the one being pursued. The system I'd hoped would save me had already judged me unreliable. Robert called that night drunk from a number I didn't recognize. "You were supposed to be the one he loved," he slurred. "I was trying to protect you both." The recording I'd made was useless now. Consent laws, entrapment, my own compromised position. He told me Mark had deleted the server, scrubbed everything, and was claiming I'd fabricated the entire story from jealousy. The proof had evaporated. All that remained was my word against his, and I'd already proven myself willing to commit the cardinal sin. While Robert talked, I looked at the positive test on my coffee table. "I'm pregnant," I said. He hung up. The fallout was systematic and complete. Mark's company transferred him to Seattle, citing personal issues. Sarah posted a photo of their family at the airport, captioned "Fresh Starts." Robert's wife filed for separation. My employer, a small marketing firm, let me go after Mark's lawyer sent a letter claiming I was sharing proprietary client information. The letter was nonsense, but the optics were poison. My Instagram became a graveyard of comments calling me a homewrecker, a gold digger, a sociopath. I didn't correct them. The narrative was cleaner without my truth. What I hadn't anticipated was the other women. 3 of them contacted me through fake accounts, claiming Mark had done the same to them. They'd seen his post about me, recognized the pattern. One sent me a video he'd taken of her, timestamped from during our relationship. He never stopped. My grand sacrifice had accomplished nothing except self-immolation. The evidence I'd gathered was useless because I'd tainted it with my own transgression. I cried for 3 hours after the last message, not for myself, but for the version of me who'd thought she could outmaneuver a monster without becoming one. My mother found me researching paternity testing between job applications for positions I wasn't qualified for. She sat down, poured 2 glasses of wine she knew I couldn't drink, and said, "Tell me what actually happened." For the first time I did. The whole sordid, stupid, self-righteous mess poured out while she held my hand. When I finished, she was quiet for so long I thought she'd finally seen me as I saw myself. Instead she said, "You tried to be a hero without a plan. That's not villainy, that's arrogance." The distinction didn't feel as comforting as she intended. I'm 6 months pregnant now, living in her guest room, working remotely for a company that doesn't know my name. Mark's trial for unrelated fraud charges, not the videos, starts next week. I could testify about his character. I could submit my screenshots. But his lawyer would drag my mistake through the mud until I looked like a scorned woman with an agenda. The prosecution hasn't called me. I check my email daily. Robert sends child support checks despite no confirmed paternity. I tear them up, then tape them back together and deposit them. I have become a person who both rejects and needs help from the man she seduced for justice. I started writing this because I saw Mark's new girlfriend posting about their epic love story from a cafe in Seattle. She's 22, a graphic designer exactly his type. I opened a blank document to warn her, to list the red flags, to be the person I needed when I found that folder. Instead I wrote my confession, because any warning I give now sounds like revenge from a woman who slept with her boyfriend's father. The irony is surgical. By trying to protect myself and others, I ensured I'll never be believed. The truth sits inside me, literally tiny fists and a heartbeat that could belong to either a man I loved who betrayed me or his father who tried to save me. So here I am, asking strangers to parse my sins. Was I wrong to weaponize my body against a man weaponizing my intimacy? Does trying to stop a predator justify becoming one? The flirting at dinner. That was me drowning in a plan so convoluted I forgot the simplest truth: tell Mark what I found, leave, and let the world handle him. But I wanted to win. I wanted to be the one who brought him down. And now I'm raising a child whose family tree is a crime scene, and Mark posts photos of his new life like I never existed.